Twiggy, which is a more Pythonic logger. You can find it on Google Code here. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Anyway, every project I think needs an origin myth, and so here's mine. I got pretty burned out on coding in the last year, and I went to PyCon trying to find my zest for it again, and in particular to find myself a project to work on, because I can go and have an awesome time at PyCon and stay up all night and drink lots of beer, and that's awesome, but that's not like what Python is like on Monday morning. And so the logging module came up on the RC channel, and people complained about it a bit, and myself included, and Jesse Noller goes, "Hey, you should write a new one." And I'm like to myself, logging? It's boring. So, okay. And later on, I'm out to dinner, and I'm telling this story to somebody, and a guy goes, "I'll help you." I'm like, shit. Shit. Because now I have found, a solution to my problem, and it's, I guess, a logging module. Yeah. And so I don't know why this is the reason that I'm getting back into coding, with this, but part of the reason I wanted to work on this is I feel like this is something that the community needs. I just went to PyCon this year and really appreciated how much work a lot of people are willing to do. Can you even see that? No, that's Ian Bicking. How much work? Anyway, just how much work some people are willing to do around problems that we as a community need solved, and just sort of to take up tasks that people are not always excited about doing, and Ian in particular is one of those who has just repeatedly done that. And so, yeah, that's just a little inspiring. And so, whatever, if I can write some code and, yeah, it gets me excited again, awesome. Okay, so the other thing is that, we're used to thinking about logging as boring, and I think if you start thinking about it again, it really matters. Sort of good logging makes a real difference. It can be your only view onto a running program, onto the guts of what it's doing. It's really your only view on past execution. That sort of, if you have something that went wrong and you need to figure out why, your only source of data is your logs. And it turns out that it's also can be a major source of data for domain-specific measurement and analysis. So you can run, oh geez, I'm blanking on the names. Various just sort of machine level monitors. So memory usage, process utilization, disk, what are my top processes doing? But that's not really going to give you all that much insight kind of into the specific guts of what your program is doing, and even maybe sort of what's going on if at your business level. Maybe for some reason you want to log every sale, and you want to log a bunch of context about how your page was laid out for that sale, whatever. That's something that really is going to go through your logging system. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think we tend to overlook it. Okay, so the standard lib logging. All right, let's play the hand game. Everybody put your hand up. Come on, everybody put your hand up. Okay. If you've never used the logging module, put your hand down. Okay. For the people who hands up, if you like the logging module, put your hand down. Okay. Yeah, it seems to be the sort of general way these things fit out. Yeah. For the people who've never used Python's logging module, have you used logging in other languages? Yeah. PHP? I don't know. Does PHP have logging? I'm sure. Java sure has logging. Ruby, I know, has some logging. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, that seems to be about the consensus. It was added in the standard library since about 2002, and like most standard library additions, it's kind of accumulated minor features, but nothing much has happened to it since then, as it should be. Do people want me to give a brief tour of this? Do you want to just poke around with how the standard library one works? Should we do that?
Just so we know that
I got some nods. I don't know. I mean, just for difference's sake.
Well, it helps some of the people who are new to Python.
Yeah. Okay. So let me pull this guy. Okay, I'm gonna this is gonna be a little hard for me here because I've got pretty hard to see. Okay, let's just import logging. Okay, logging basic config.
Hey dude, is that IPython?
This is bpython. I just came across this like in the last 2 weeks ago. If you're familiar with IPython, this is like the IPython I wanted IPython to be. It's like just the shell. It just does this. It's really nice. It's yeah, without all the kind of crazy, complicated things that IPython is capable of doing.
Also has the advantage I can't read anything on this.
Really? Okay, I can fix that. Let's try this.
Yeah, cursor. That's good.
Sorry. Show inspector arrow. Let's try. Woo! Is that too small? Way too small. Okay. Yeah, we'll do that. That's fine. Yeah, small can be made big.
Apple Shift Plus should work for.
Oh, I need to fix the. Huh?
Oh,
Oh, I've got the wrong window. Where's my mouse over? What happened there? Oh, yeah, that's end curses for you. Okay. Is this a good size? Can we see this? Yeah. All right. So import logging, much better. Log here. I'm gonna send over here. Logging dot basic config. So this is all the standard lib logging. Well, let's make a log. My log. Okay, cool. It's logging. Get logger. So you can give it a name. We're gonna call it Frank. Okay. So. What did I do? Or maybe it's just okay. Log dot. Okay, so yeah, you have all these different levels. Let's see if this is probably where it said. Yep. No warning. Anybody remember what the? Is it just level equals for the basic config? Maybe ring the same bells.
Yeah, what's that error?
Equals logging dot debug. Okay. No.
It doesn't take effect the second time.
Lame. Lame.
That's why you should get loggers
Okay.
level.
I can, huh? Okay. So this is the basic way you do this. So. Okay, so you get your logger, and you usually get one of these like per module, per class, rarely per instance, very rarely per instance, right? You might set one, you know, and then you can just sort of start talking to it. Hi there, and it will spit out things. And so you can configure this to write to files. You can configure it to output to change that so you get timestamps. You can get all sorts of kind of different information. And so you can do also things like, hi there, yes, and then let's say Python years, okay? So you can substitute format strings, and so you can pass variables around there and stuff like that. So good so far? Okay, fairly straightforward. So where things start to get a little weird is, does it work like this? No. Yeah. Is you can have what are called nested loggers. And so the child log is, how does this work? Logging.get logger is going to be Frank dot, what Frank's kid's name is going to be Jerry. Great. Okay, so do this. Kids. Okay. Logging's got a dot in the name. Where this gets significant is these map to sort of points where, oh gosh, I really don't want to explain the handlers, but basically the hooks you have to control the logger match up to objects kind of in this sort of hierarchy. Is so you can attach a handler to, oh no, that's not right. You can attach basically the way you control what actually gets output is I can say, does anybody want to help me here? It's been a while since I've used this.
So, at least if I remember correctly, there are formatters,
Yeah.
and there are handlers. So handlers handle, like, does it go to the console, does it go to a file?
Yeah.
Right? And then,
There are a lot of objects here. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of objects here. The key to the tricky bit here is with these dots is Python log supports what's called hierarchical logging. And so if you then log a message to Frank Jerry or whatever, if you haven't attached any output machinery to that specific point, it pops up the tree. And so we'll look for output machinery up at the Frank level. Make sense? That's about kind of the general structure. Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about this. I mean, I feel like most people, like about 2/3 of folks have used it, and I've hopefully given everybody else just enough of a sense. Yeah, that's what I got. It's okay. It's been around, hierarchy stuff. Some good bits. It's very well documented, which is over on this other window. Here we go. Okay, very well documented, extensively, 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 very extensively documented. Yeah. The other cool thing is that it has a really familiar API. In particular, this is the Log4j API. Very similar. And this has been implemented in a whole bunch of other languages. PHP, I guess there's another Python implementation I've never seen. Ruby, right? This is kind of the de facto logging API. That's a good thing, right? Because it means when people come to Python, they can pretty much sit down and start using the logging right off the bat. It's been around since 2002. It meets everybody's needs. Blah. Great. But as we noted before, there's kind of some vague displeasure. It's complicated. I don't know if you see, there's a lot of objects. There's a lot of kind of different parts and functors and sort of just a lot of different knobs and different classes and so forth. There's also this general sense that it's slow. Nobody's really got any good hard numbers on that. People have compared it to syslog. It's not really a great comparison because you're sort of you have an entire other process that's doing things for you. And it came in third place in a poll. Somebody took an informal poll of which standard library modules need redesign, and this was in third place. Yeah, so that's what we don't like about it. People have a lot of pet peeves about it. If you use this a lot, it tends to stick new lines in your output. It'd be nice to have your log lines be on just one line instead of they sometimes will bust stuff across multiple lines if there's, new lines in user data. Unhandled exceptions in the logging mechanisms itself will propagate into your user code. So if you muck up your format string and you kind of pass a bad tuple, that will throw whatever type error exception or whatever that formatting error is directly into your user code. That's really annoying. We'd like to make sure that doesn't happen with tests or whatever, but it's just really annoying. The tuples for format strings can be kind of a pain in the neck. My personal pet peeve is the big lock. There's a single giant lock, threading lock, around every access of every object and every attribute and everything that goes through that module. One big lock. No granularity. we all know like multi-threaded performance in Python is not awesome. It's getting better. Some of the stuff, the GIL patches in 2.6 and 2.7 are going to improve things. It's never going to be great, but to serialize things because of your logging is really not going to help. It's just, yeah. And so that's my personal pet peeve. And so what's wrong here is that basically the module is full of Java. My eyes, it's full of Java. And, we're being Python people are not such huge fans of this. And so, well, kind of duh. And it's duh because it's explicitly a port of log4j. And so in PEP 282 back in 2002 when that was improved, it cites a few influences, and the major influence is log4j. Because that was sort of, Python was around version 1.5 or 2, I think this thing works back with. And, that's back in the Java heyday. And so if you're going to borrow for a logging module, that's what you were going to borrow. It's not a bad decision. It's just, full of Java. Yeah, so what do I have next here? I think we can do better. I like doing better. I think we can write something that's more Pythonic, that's got less Java. And I think that's going to let us do some cool stuff, some of which I'll try to show you today, some of which is just sort of kicking around in my brain. I think we're going to be able to do structured logging that's sort of with a little more emphasis on outputting messages that are kind of have a little more structure to them, that are rather than just, or a little more easily machine consumable. And I think that opens up some really cool things that we can maybe do down the road. Yeah, cool stuff. The other thing is it's got a lot fewer parts. This is Twiggy now. It's got loggers, it's got emitters, it's got glue. That's it. There's no formatters, there's no handlers, there's no functors. You almost don't even have to deal with the messages themselves 90% of the time. There's no log records. It's just way fewer classes, way fewer objects, way less Java. Yeah. So, okay. Any questions? Comments? Okay. Up next is the demo. I really like demos. I really like demos. Let's see. Can you see what happened here? Okay. I need this other. Oop. All right. You need to come back here. Sorry about all this. This way. Okay. Does that? Okay. Ooh, come here, you. What's going on? Okay. That's way too big. Oh, no. It's a little complicated. I get really dyslexic when I do this sometimes. So I'm totally serious. So let's just get things set up for this looking right. Okay. So much like the basic config, right? Big object you get here that's interesting is this log. Let's see if we can scroll this up here. No, that's just how it's going to be. Okay. All right. Can we see all that down there? Or should I? No, you can't, huh? How about now? Probably better. Okay. Ooh, sorry. It's going to get all fucked up here. Okay. There we go. Yeah, right, so you have this log object that you might not care all that much about. Okay. We all see that? Yeah, all right. And so this takes format strings, like the standard library one. It also supports new style strings. And so starting actually in 2.6, there's this other way of writing the kind of doing string substitution besides just sort of the percent style. It uses, you can kind of, it's a little more sophisticated. You can actually do, I sort of has grown on me quite a lot. But yeah, it kind of uses these curly brackets instead. Yeah. And so it supports that too. And so these logs can have names too. We like names. Okay. Self-Rado. But so unlike if you're familiar with the standard library logging, where you do a get logging of a particular name, and it gives you back the same object. It gives you back the same object, right, in the standard libraries logging approach. That's not what's going on here. This is just a human readable, parameter, right? Okay. We have emitters. This is way simpler than all the handlers and the formatters and stuff, if you're familiar with that. But the control is somewhat similar. You can kind of set levels. So, to kind of control what gets outputted or not. Right, all pretty standard. All right. Okay, so you can also do filtering on regexes or other callables really easily. So it's going to tell you have your pants on, but that message just gets suppressed. Really simple, really simple. No objects to create. Like it all just this is all just that glue, right? That's all going to just do it for you. All right, so let's make that all make sense. Yeah. Okay. So let's all kind of just turn this back off. Okay. Whoa, what's next here? Sorry, bring this over here. No, you want to be here. Here you go. Okay. Ooh. Sorry, consult my notes. Admitting. Oh, all right. So, right, output. Let's fix some of those pet peeves, huh? So, this is always annoying, right? Ooh, that's not really impressive at all, is it? Sorry. There we go. Right, this problem where you get some user input, some string that comes off of, a user or just something you read out of a file that's got a new line in it, and that somehow makes its way into your log file. And what usually happens is if we turn off that suppression, is you get this. It's where your log line gets split across two physical lines in your output file. That's just kind of annoying, right? Like it just makes parsing the whole thing and sort of going through it and grepping it and the whole thing just sort of stupid. Okay. Somewhat the same problem with traceback. Okay. So way nicer tracebacks, right? Same traceback, but let's just prefix it, right? Let's just make it so we can find those lines and just pre-treat them, just throw them right out. We don't care, right? We're trying to do analysis, greps, whatever. The mechanism for this actually makes it almost trivial. What you want to do is fold that traceback up into a single line so it gets in the text of your message. It's almost trivial. You just say instead of using a traceback, you just use basically an empty string. It's really pretty straightforward, believe me. Okay, what's next for me here? Right, fix those changes. Oh, okay, yeah, this stuff's cool. The other thing is, so there's also a lot more emphasis on this kind of style I call method chaining. And you can sort of see that up at that log.trace thing, right, up there on that fourth line or whatever, right? I think this is really cool. And so this is where some of that structured logging stuff comes in. And so if you want to append sort of extra data about your logging statement, right? Like, I don't know, like you're going down for a walk down some recursive algorithm and you want to know what's your n, how many paths you're going down. I don't know, it's something. Yeah, like it's nice to be able to get at that in a kind of easily extractable way. There's not really a good way to do that in the standard. It's doable in the standard library one. It's kind of clunky. You have to pass these dicks around. And so we can make that way easier. This is actually a shortcut for it. Right? And so we can get this output that's really, really easy to parse. Right? This is all just, I don't have any special configuration for this. This is all just out of the defaults. Like the default, you pass those kind of fields in, and they will automatically come out in your logs, nicely separated and with equal signs and kind of just real easy. You could probably bash at that with awk or sed or whatever you like. There's some cool stuff you can do with this if you start saving these objects, right? Like if you bind, let's say you want to attach a log and you want to log everything, or this is a common problem in web apps, like you want to log everything that happens with a particular transaction or a particular request or session or something, right? And so you need to attach that session ID. You want that to show up in all those log messages for that particular object. And so the cool thing you can do here is sort of stuff that as a logger, right? So stuff that per request log isn't just stuffing on your request, stuff in your WSGI environment variable somewhere. And then just go ahead and use it, right? And you can just keep using that, and your code doesn't even need to know that it's got to track that session ID. Like you don't have to keep track of it everywhere. You don't have to look it up every time. You just set it once, and then kind of you just use that logger in the same kind of way you would use any other logger, right? That all the way up to the simplest example I showed up at the top. And it's the same basic API. And it just comes out right in your logs. Way easier to parse. Way easier to sort of do the sort of things we want to do, but have kind of been tough. I think this style is really cool. I think we can write some really sophisticated statements quickly and concisely, and with not too much sophisticated machinery in the background. I mean, there's a little fanciness, but it's nothing too complicated. Pretty easily produce kind of interesting output and interesting transforms, and yeah, it's cool. It's just kind of a cool way to sort of break up, like you want a lot of different information and you want to, express it in your call concisely. Yeah. All right, more cool stuff. Twiggy's also really dynamic. All right, so here we've got this little thing. This is a little helper function, just tells you what thread you're running in. Okay. All right. And so what we can do here is actually, when you pass a function in as one of the things to get past your format arg or in a field, the function gets called and the return value substituted it in. So bear with me here, okay? So that makes sense so far? Yeah. All right. So this lets us do some really cool stuff. Okay. So, all right. That's all wrapping. Okay. See what we did there? So we basically created an instance of this kind of magic-y logger object that's going to log under the name tracker, and is going to output as fields, right, in that structured bit. The object ID, that's just basically the ID function in Python just returns the memory. It's implementation dependent, but it returns the memory address. It's basically a unique number that points to your object. And then we're going to pass it this thread name function. And so that when we actually log, that every time we log that message, that thread name function is going to get called. Okay. And so what we can do with this is to create this this is some of the cool stuff you can do in Python. Wrapper class, okay, that it's going to let us wrap some object and track, just in this case, I mean, this isn't complete, attribute accesses, what thread they happen from. And that comes out in our logs. And so if you're debugging, again, we don't like threads, blah, blah, blah. If you're debugging an app that's got threads, it's legacy or whatever, and kind of you want to get some insight into what's going on the inside, this sort of thing can be useful. Okay. All right. So it tells us we initialized our tracking, right? And we did that in the main thread. All right. And we accessed bar. We did that in the main thread too. Okay. So now let's actually try running this thing. in another thread. That thread is called the doubler. I don't know why, that's just what we called it. Okay, so we're going to start that. And so that Lambda function, right, just gets run, that little bit of code gets run in another thread. And when we do that and it goes and accesses the bar attribute, we get a log message out. And that thread name function that we passed all the way back up here got called again. And so each time one of those log messages got spit out, it got called. And it gets called in sort of, in this case, whatever thread the thing's running under. And so, yeah, is that working right? Yeah. We can pretty transparently add this kind of thing to apps. And sort of, that sort of dynamism I think is really neat. I think there's some powerful stuff you can do with that. You can think about, the object here being tracked around could be a database cursor. All sorts of things. I think that sort of that kind of lazy execution lets you do some neat stuff. Okay, what else? Any questions so far? No? Okay, I'm almost done. Oh, you got one.
Yeah, so some loggers can send emails and things like that.
My logger cannot do any of those things yet. We'll get to that, yeah. I got like maybe about 2 examples left here, just small stuff. So this is largely just optimization. So the main way you're going to control what messages get output is through emitters. And I don't know, you might have, 3, 5, 10, probably don't need more than 10 emitters in a kind of particular app, and those are going to route different messages different places. So your debug messages will just be turned off, and your standard messages will your info messages will just go to a file, and your warnings and higher will go over email to a sysadmin who will hate you every time his pager goes off. Fine. So that's the kind of, you can control how those get formatted. Maybe we'll have some HTML outputs, whatever. But as a kind of an optimization, right? Like there's this concern that like ideally when you want your logging to have as little impact on the sort of running of your program as possible, right? Like you kind of, it's nice, but like how much would we give up to have better logging? 25% runtime? No way. 15% runtime? Probably not. I don't know. It depends. I mean, it depends on like what we're going to do with those logs and kind of what data we can get. Like, 10%. Okay, now we're talking reasonable. But the faster these things can be, the more likely we are to use them, and sort of the better we're all going to be and happy. And so a little bit about. So that's one of the things I'm trying for here is kind of just something that is going to be speedier. I'm kind of too early to say how much, but we can talk about it. So just some optimizations. You can set min levels on the logs themselves. And so the use case, right, so this isn't on the emitters, this is the actual log objects. The use case here, you can similarly set kind of filters, is to turn off a particular message or a particular set of messages in a library that you're using that's being stupid. Like some library that is in an inner loop calling shenanigans. Like if it's doing this like 300,000 times or something, and you're trying to make it go fast, and it's written like this, and you don't want to edit it, or maybe there's a reason, whatever. You just want to turn that off. You can also kind of poke at a sort of lower level. There's sort of little hooks. That's not like the main way you're going to go about doing this, but that's sort of if you need to reach in and kind of muck with a particular module's use of a logger to sort of be like, stop it, you can do that. So, yeah. All right, demos. Like demos. We like demos. Okay. About demos. I'm surprised nobody asked about this. We can come back to the demo bit in a bit. In summary, I think this is a lot better. I think this is a lot cleaner. I think it's a lot lighter. I think chain methods are really cool. I think this is just way more Pythonic. That's, yeah, my value of better here. So yeah, all right, the future. There's still a lot of stuff to do. Tests, docs, blah, blah, error, blah, blah. And so there's a lot of blahs here because I recognize there's a huge amount of kind of unsexy work that goes into something like this. You know, like there's just a lot of parts to work with. There's a lot of kind of, as Brian was asking about, sort of sophisticated ways you can do outputting, rotating files, timed rotating files. Maybe we want to blast this off to syslog. Maybe we want to blast your messages off to the Windows NT log service, right? There's a whole lot of kind of different things this sort of needs to handle appropriately. Yeah, but so I think most of the work and most of the cooler work is on the emitter side, on the parts that actually do the output. And so some of the stuff I've got in mind are like a CouchDB backend, maybe some sort of like traditional RDB MySQL kind of backend of sort of to take advantage of that structured logging ability to just sort of stuff that in there and to kind of be able to, hey, say, find me all the messages for, you know, this session, whatever we're trying to track down a security thing, stuff like that. I'm also really keen to write asynchronous backends. So basically to move the write, whether to a file, to a socket over HTTP, whether to, you know, MySQL, to move that write out of the critical path, right? To get that write out of sort of your user code and kind of let it happen asynchronously. 99% of the time, and maybe it, you know, certainly, you know, warrant, you know, info and lower, we don't care if that message hits disks like that instant. And if we lose it, we can live with it. And so if we can get a big speed up, you know, with that as an option, that sounds cool. And so, yeah, either threading, a kind of threading backend, so that sort of the writes to the database or to the file gets stuff into a thread, or preferably multiprocessing. So basically spinning up a secondary process just to do the writes from logging. I don't know, that sounds really excessive to me, but I don't know, people like more processes, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, so the other idea I have is I'm not entirely sure where this is going, is I'd like to hook this up to unit test so that you can make assertions about your logs, that your log statements, like that when an error condition happens, right, that you can test that your log message actually gets outputted when it's supposed to, right? Like we want to test those error branches in our unit test anyway, but it'd be cool to, yeah, to sort of assert as sort of part of that testing of these exceptional branches that the alerting that's supposed to happen actually happens. All right. Because if it's not in your logs, like, it might as well not have happened, and it's just hides and bugs. The final thing I'm hoping to do, and this is kind of going to depend on whether people are interested, whether this gets any adoption whatsoever, is a facsimile of the log4j style. I think that the structures here with a bunch more code can get probably 90% of the way of kind of the most common use cases of sort of user code using the existing logging system. So the whole emitter and handler configuration, that's all going to change, obviously. The whole like process of how do you actually set up and glue your output together, right? That's just so fundamentally different under Twiggy than the standard library thing that's just blah. But for most of the code, and most of the code that sort of we usually spend most of our time caring about, kind of like our actual app code, I think I can write a layer here that looks enough like the standard library logging one that the pain of switching is minimal, which is cool, which is really cool. Because, yeah, I mean, there's just so much code out there, and like, how do you start writing new code? So yeah, questions? Really?
What about timestamps in log files?
Oh yeah, I should show what a sample. I should show what a sample log looks like. I should show what a sample log looks like. So yeah, this is the default output for. Oh hi, that's on the totally wrong terminal, isn't it? There we go. This is the default sample output looks like. Right now, by just default, I've got it configured for. Oh gosh, what are these? The ISO. These are the JSON style dates. The ISO here. You can make me look at my code. 3.5. Somebody help me. This formatted date. This formatted date.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's standard thing.
Yeah, I like this one.
I think that's
That's it. Like I could have picked a different one. I happen to like this one.
I think that's standard.
Yeah. This is like an ISO date. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, it looks pretty similar. You know, to what we were seeing up there. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of work that needs to get done around how do you actually write this, what in the current one are called the formatters, but basically turn that log message into a line that can be outputted. Or if you want to get fancy, and turn them into XML and send them over whatever to a web browser or whatever the heck you're doing. Yeah, I don't know. Anything else? Yeah.
So is this all going to standard error or standard out right now?
What?
Mention that or not?
It defaults to standard error. If you just bring it into, if you just don't give it a file name into its quick setup, basic config, it just goes to standard error. Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. Cool.
Let's leave it up here.
Oh, yeah.
Clap.
Huh.
Clap. Everyone.